You don't seem to be breathing right. Might be the jets. I'm gonna change the jets on the carburetor. I gotta check the points in the valves when we get there. Also the jets in the carb.
Check the jets. 58 thou.
Welcome back to the shop. We are going to not only just check the jets, we are going to change the jets. Reason being, the last time I changed the jets in here, we were anticipating taking this car to Rocky Mountain Race Week, which is in the middle of the summer when it's hot, and it's up at altitude where the air is extra thin. So I put the small jets in accordingly. It's September now. Our elevation here is about 750 feet. So it's going to be way lean with the jets that are in there right now, and I want to go racing, so we need to fix that. So we're going to take the ram air system off and the air cleaners off. At that point we can see the carburetors, so I'll give a quick explanation about how Pontiac Tripower system works. Then we'll go to a time lapse as I tear into the carburetors to where we can actually see the jets, and then we'll show you a little bit more detail on changing the jets, and then we'll button it back all up, probably with a time lapse again. So let's time lapse away the air cleaners and the ram air pan first. So the tri in Pontiac Tripower means three, and we've got three carburetors. And these are 3 2-barrel carburetors if you're not familiar with it at all. The center carburetor is pretty much an ordinary 2-barrel carburetor. It's got all of the usual stuff. So it's got a choke, it's got idle mixture screws, it's got a power valve, it's got an accelerator pump, it's got main jets, it's got all the usual stuff. The end carbs, however, are really simplified carburetors. So they have an accelerator pump, but they've got no chokes, they've got no idle circuit, they've got no power valves. So ordinarily, we're starting, we're running, we're idling on just the center carb. And for most part throttle operation, we're just on the center carb. So you can see from the carb linkage here, as we open the carburetor, well, the center carb is opening and doing its thing, but the end carbs aren't doing anything until you hit that stop on the linkage, and then that starts opening the rear end carb, and the rear end carb is connected to the front end carb with a link on the other side. So once we get past that much throttle position, then all of the carburetors come into play. So again, these things are pretty simple. It's just a main jet and accelerator pump. So when we're changing the jet for wide open throttle, which is what we're interested in doing here right now, we're just going to change the jets in the end carbs. Center carb, we can leave that one alone. Jets are close enough there for idle and part throttle. I don't worry about that from summer to winter and high altitude to low altitude. It's close enough. But the end carbs is where things get really important at wide open throttle. So if I remember correctly, I think I've got 71s in here, 70s, 69s. I don't know. I'd have to go check my logbook, but we'll find out when we open them up. And what we're going to do is we're going to put 75s in here. So to change the jets on these Rochesters, you need to remove the top part of the carburetor. And unfortunately, the fuel feeds into the top part of the carburetor, which means we need to disconnect all of the fuel lines first, need to disconnect the linkages for the accelerator pump, and then undo all of the screws, ideally without dropping any of them into the engine. Pull the lids off, ideally without the float falling off, and then we can get down there and get to the jet. So let's go to a time lapse and let's start tearing into these things. All right, we've got the carb top off. We've sucked the excess fuel out of there, and now it's just a matter of getting in here and removing the jets. Now these are brass, so a magnetic screwdriver is not going to help, and they like to fall into the well. Getting the old ones out, sorry I keep hitting the camera here, is not much of an issue. I can stick my fingers in there and fish them out, but trying to get the new ones in there is often a bit of a challenge. Okay, so again, without consulting my logbook, I couldn't remember exactly what size of jet we had put in there. And you probably can't see this. Sorry, whacking the camera again. Stop doing that. But stamped on there is the jet size. Now, my eyes are old, but it looks like it's a 68. Let me grab a magnifying glass and check for sure. Okay, so the magnifying glass confirms that these jets are indeed 68s, which is actually smaller than I thought I put in there. So now I'm thinking that maybe stepping up to a 75 might be overkill. So let's split the difference and put in a 73. How about that? Now, to try and get these suckers in there, I've found that using a little tool like this, and this just came with a vacuum pump kit that I've got, but it allows me to just kind of stick the jet on the end there, and then, well, you're not going to be able to see this because my hand is in the way, but it's a nice little tool to get them started on the thread. Okay, so got the 73s in the front carb. So we'll put the lid back on and then repeat the operation with the rear carb. Put its lid back on, hook up the fuel lines, hook up the accelerator pumps, and yeah, away we go. Oh yeah, and we're going to update our logbook so we know what jets we've got in this thing. Because it's not that easy to tear into the carb to look at the number when you've forgotten what jet size you put in there. So records are very important. So let's get after that. it occurred to me that maybe some of the younger viewers won't quite understand what the whole deal is with jets and carburetors, so I figured I'd maybe do a quick explanation of how a carburetor works. The goal of the carburetor is to add the correct amount of fuel to the air so that we get the correct air-fuel ratio in the engine for the combustion that we want. So air flows in through the carburetor through one or more venturis, and a venturi is just, you know, something that the area necks down and then it widens out again. So where the area necks down, the air velocity increases, and where the air velocity increases from our old friend Bernoulli, the pressure is going to drop. So that creates a pressure drop that we can use to draw fuel in to where the air is flowing. The fuel atomizes and eventually evaporates, finds its way to the cylinder, and ideally we get the right air-fuel ratio in there. Now, what determines how much fuel flows in there for a given amount of pressure drop is the jet. Okay, so, you know, our 68 jet here, the number refers to the size of the tiny little hole in the jet. So the bigger the number, the bigger the hole in the jet. So for a given amount of airflow, for a given pressure drop in there, if we've got a bigger hole in there, that's going to add more fuel in, and it's going to give us a richer air-fuel mixture. Okay, you saw that when I had the lid off, the jets are at the bottom of the float bowl here, so fuel flows in. There's a float. This is just like your toilet. Fuel flows in, it fills up, the float comes up, and then there's a needle valve that closes as the float comes up to maintain the proper fuel level in here. So we've got this reservoir of fuel. We've got the pressure drop that we're getting from the air flowing through the venturi, and then we've got the tiny little hole in the jet here that determines the relative amount of fuel that's going to flow in there for a given airflow. As more air flows in there, the velocity of the air through the venturi increases, the pressure drop increases. So in an ideal world, more air, more fuel, and it all works linearly. Doesn't quite work that well because of the compressibility effects of air, but without getting into the hardcore engineering math on that, which I'll save maybe for another video. But anyway, for now, we'll just assume that more air, more pressure drop, more fuel, and we get a nice consistent air-fuel mixture through the whole operating range. All right, so that's how you change the jets in a Pontiac Tripower. Now, you might have also noticed that the seal isn't glued down to my ram air tub, and I wanted to explain that quickly. In case I'm caught in the rain, I can plug up the opening of the hood scoop, pull this thing off, let the engine breathe under hood air, but at least I'm not going to have rain going in through the scoop and possibly being ingested by the engine. So streetcar, so that's why we leave this thing on loose. The other thing that I discovered was the opening in the hood scoop on the early GTOs, 65, 6, and 7, is pretty tiny, and it's not enough of a hole for a big engine like this thing to breathe. So the first time I ran this thing down the track, it actually sucked in the seal because it was pulling so much vacuum in here trying to draw air through those tiny little holes. So I was quite glad I didn't glue down the ram air seal at that point. So I still see that happening. I will make a run, and again, it'll pull the seal in to try and get more air. So now, before I make a run, I'll actually pull the seal off so it can breathe. It's still getting some cold air, hopefully mostly cold air, but I'm not going to put an aftermarket hood on the thing, and I'm not going to start hogging out the stock hood scoop. So it is what it is. Make do in the meantime with contingency plans. Anyway, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe if you haven't. As usual, share this with your friends now that YouTube isn't sending out emails for subscriber uploads. Hopefully you're still finding out about my new videos somewhere. Hopefully YouTube changes their mind at some point and starts sending out the emails again. But yeah, we'll see what we're doing on the next video. I don't know yet. Probably something on this thing because I got a list of other things I want to get done. But in the meantime, again, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. I got two cameras going here. Why don't I use both of them? Okay. And, yeah, I need to slate this. Damn it, Ed. Shut up, Cricket.